Chapter 5. Back to the village. The rain came that morning, heavy and uninvited, like God himself was trying to wash away Dory's shame. She stood by the door with her small suitcase, the same one she'd once packed for school trips, not exile. Her fingers clenched the handle so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Behind her, the house she had called home for 17 years stood silent, watching her go. Miss Rose said nothing. Her husband didn't even come out to say goodbye, and Dory, she couldn't find words to fill the space between them. The car engine hummed, and with each kilometer, her world shrank behind her. From the neat city streets to the dusty roads, from school uniforms and laughter to whispers and judgment. She watched the houses grow fewer and the trees grow wilder. It felt like she was traveling backward in time, from the life she knew to the one she'd been spared from, the one her real mother had escaped years ago. The journey. The bus was old, its metal sides rattling like bones. The air smelled of sweat and rain and regret. She sat by the window, her forehead pressed against the cool glass, watching the mud splash against it. No one on that bus knew who she was, and yet she felt like everyone could see the invisible sign hanging around her neck, the girl who sinned, the girl who disappointed them all. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. If she cried, she'd break. And she couldn't afford to break, not yet. So she stared out the window and thought of Mike. His laughter, his promises, the softness of his voice when he said forever. Forever, she realized, was a word that boys like him used the way others used perfume, to smell good in the moment, not to last. Arrival. By the time she reached the village, the rain had stopped, but the world still looked wet and tired. Children ran barefoot, chasing chickens through puddles. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, soil, and something bitterly nostalgic. And then, there she was, Miss Jane. Older than Dory remembered, smaller somehow, with lines etched deep around her eyes. Her hands were calloused, her clothes faded, her expression unreadable. She stood in front of the small mud brick house, staring at Dory like she was both a miracle and a mistake. "Karibu nyumbani," she said at last. "Welcome home." Home? The word didn't fit. Dory's lips trembled, but she nodded and whispered, "Asante." No hugs, no tears, just that. An exchange of words between two women bound by blood and brokenness. Harsh reality. Life in the village was not soft. It woke before the sun and ended long after the stars came out. Jane had no time for pity, not for herself, not for Dory. At dawn, she handed her a hoe and pointed to the fields. If you are old enough to carry a child, you are old enough to carry a hoe. Those words stung like salt on an open wound. Dory's hands, once used to holding books and rolling dough for her baking experiments, now blistered from the rough wood. Her skin darkened under the sun, her back ached, her dreams shrank. She fetched water from a distant well, carried firewood twice her size, cooked meals she barely ate. Every night she fell onto the mat exhausted, her body sore, her heart hollow. But the cruelest pain wasn't in her muscles. It was in the silence between her and Jane. They shared a house, but not a bond. Dory didn't know that the woman scolding her for laziness was the same one who had once carried her in her arms, whispering prayers for her survival. Jane couldn't tell her, not yet, not while her own heart was still tangled in shame and regret. The weight of judgment. Villagers talked. They always do. They whispered about the city girl with a belly too round and eyes too sad. They called her Muhuni, msichana wa mjini aliyeshindwa kujizuia. She walked past them with her head low, pretending not to hear. But each word sunk deep, bruising her spirit. Sometimes she would escape to the river, sit on a rock, and just breathe. The water soothed her. It was the only thing that didn't judge her. There, she dreamed again, of frosting cakes and wearing dresses, of laughter and music and modeling on a runway she'd once traced with chalk on her dorm floor. But dreams don't grow well in soil watered with tears. Miss Jane's struggle. Jane watched her from a distance. She didn't say much, but every night, when Dory had fallen asleep, she'd stand by her mat and brush the girl's hair away from her face. Sometimes she'd whisper apologies that no one heard. She wanted to tell her the truth, that she was her mother, that she never meant to let her go, that life had been cruel to them both. But guilt silenced her. She didn't think she deserved forgiveness. So instead, she taught through discipline. When Dory complained of back pain, she said, "Pain teaches endurance." When Dory cried, she said, "Tears won't cook ugali." And when Dory fell asleep early, she'd murmur, "At least she's resting." Love sometimes hides behind rough words. Reflections of a broken girl. As months passed, Dory's belly grew round and firm. At night, she'd feel small movements, gentle flutters that reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. She began to talk to the child. "Hey, little one," she'd whisper, "we'll leave here someday. I'll bake you a cake for your first birthday. I'll show you the city lights." Those were the moments that kept her alive, little sparks of hope in the darkness. But every morning brought her back to reality. The smell of smoke, the weight of work, the endless cycle of chores. She began to understand Jane's silence, her strength, her exhaustion. Maybe love wasn't always warm and gentle. Sometimes it was the act of surviving for someone else. Chapter 6. John